My name is John Smith. I met my wife, Kay, who's 4 years older than me, at a sports gym. I work as an instructor. Kay came for a trial lesson. During these lessons, we first measure the client's body stats, then show them around the gym, and teach them how to use the machines. The instructor for trial lessons changes weekly. Appointments can be made online. Kay had booked for 10 a.m. I could tell she was the one as soon as I saw her wandering around. I'm Kay, here for the trial lesson. Hi, I'm John. Thank you for booking a trial lesson. That was our first conversation. Honestly, I was surprised at how slim Kay was when I first saw her. I wondered why she even came to the gym. Later, she told me she wanted to build some muscle. After the trial lesson, she decided to join the gym. Over time, as she came more often, Kay discreetly gave me her contact information. It was the first time a woman had approached me, so I thought it was a prank. But we started talking, went on dates, and eventually got married. Kay wanted a big wedding, so we had it in Hawaii. Our gym friends even flew out to join us. I met Kay's best friend, Emily, and her old college friend, Mike, for the first time there. Our marriage was fulfilling. When I was single, I used to eat store-bought meals alone. But after marriage, I'd come home to a lit house, a delicious meal, and a warm bath waiting for me. And of course, Kay would greet me with a smile. However, our happiness was short-lived. One big reason was our inability to have children, something we both desired. We both liked children. We thought it would happen quickly. But even after 2-3 years, there was no sign. By the 4th year, we decided to get tested. Finding a cause might have brought some closure. But unfortunately, there was nothing wrong with either of us. It was just a matter of timing. We were both healthy, but we couldn't conceive. It made us think maybe it was about compatibility or fate. My feelings must have shown because I accidentally made Kay cry one night. A news program was featuring children. They're so adorable. I blurted out innocently. Realizing my mistake, I quickly changed the channel. Why are you changing it? I thought it might bother you. It's you who's bothered. Wait, calm down. I am calm. You're the one treating me like I'm fragile, she said, breaking into tears. After that, we stopped talking about children altogether when children are shown on TV. We no longer brought up the topic. The tension was suffocating. So, I took up fishing, a hobby suggested by my gym buddies. Unfortunately, the friend who recommended it had a completely different schedule, so I couldn't learn from him, and that's when Kay introduced me to Mike. According to Kay, he is an expert fisherman who even owns a boat. Being my wife's best friend, I was pretty nervous at first. Hello, nice to meet you. Well, not for the first time, but it's the first time we're actually having a conversation. I'm really happy to have another fishing buddy. Mike was incredibly kind and did a great job easing my nerves. His fishing skills were as impressive as Kay had said. He was very easygoing and enjoyable to be with. Spending my days off fishing became an escape from the cooling relationship with Kay. Since I was spending every weekend fishing, I started to worry about Kay, so I suggested a weekend trip for the three of us. Mike booked the stay at a lodge in Asheville. I'm sorry for intruding on your couple's trip. Don't be silly. You're not intruding. Thanks for booking that famous lodge. Well, you said Kay wanted to go there. You remembered. I hadn't paid much attention at the time, but thinking back, there might have been something more to their conversation. Let's drop off our bags at the lodge and go night fishing. Night fishing? That sounds great. I've never done it before. I knew Mr. Smith was curious about it. Thank you. Even after all these weeks, aren't the two of you still calling each other mister? Mike and I looked at each other. She might be right. Maybe it's time we drop the formalities today. Sounds good. If anyone uses mister, they owe me $10. $10 is too much. I meant, it's a deal. $10 it is. I was surprised to see a side of Kay I never saw at home, lively and youthful in her conversation. Night fishing was a blast. The fish's eyes gleamed blue in the water, creating a magical scene. The technique was different from daytime fishing, moving the rod up and down along the pier wall. Even Kay, a beginner, could do it easily and caught the most fish, thanks to beginner's luck. We had a late dinner in our room. We enjoyed a feast of seafood. It was a delightful meal for both our eyes and stomach. After eating, we took a bath. Mike, feeling tired, opted for the shower in our room. Did he feel awkward intruding on our couple's time? Since we were all close, we decided to sleep in the same room, setting up our beds side by side. It feels like we're back in college. It sure does. I went to an all-boys school. That must have been boring. Hey, don't insult my youth. It was fun in its own way. I kinda envy the all-boys experience. It was just smelly and miserable. We all laughed. I wish these fun times could last forever. It felt like a friendship between men and women that I had never experienced in my youth. All thanks to Mike. I'm not great with alcohol, so I fell asleep at some point. I woke up around 4 a.m. It was still dark outside. I have a terrible hangover headache, probably from the leftover alcohol. It was fun, but I probably got carried away. Then, in the darkness, I heard voices. I thought of asking Kay to bring me some water if she was awake. It's hard to break up, but if it's for happiness, it's worth it. Break up. Squinting in the darkness, I could faintly make out a shocking scene. My face turned pale. Kay and Mike were holding hands and gazing into each other's eyes. It's us, Mike. Don't worry about anything. Thanks, Kay. I trust you. I love you. Hearing their conversation, I hesitantly turned on the light. As the room brightened, they were indeed holding hands. But they quickly let go, surprised by my awakening. What's going on? I blurted out. You were up? What is this? Holding hands. I heard you two talking. What is it about breaking up, about loving each other? June, you're misunderstanding. Mike, stay out of this. I'm talking to Kay. You're misunderstanding. This isn't what it looks like. Are you kidding me? This is a joke. Just calm down. How can I calm down? Let me explain. Mike, just stay quiet. But, exactly, that's the problem. Ever since we met as a trio, I felt something more than friendship in your conversations. Were you two together all along? We're just friends, nothing more. Who would believe that after seeing this? I feel betrayed, Mike. I thought we had become friends, but was it just because you had a thing with Kay? That's not true. There's really nothing going on. So, you're both denying it. Have you been enjoying fooling me? Coming on this trip must have been convenient. Enough already. We're telling you there's nothing between us. Huh. Now you're getting defensive. Is this why we couldn't have kids? Because you were with him. What are you talking about? Were you making sure we couldn't conceive because you were with him? That's horrible. Horrible? That's my line. Get out. Leave me right now. Fine. Let's go, Mike. Kay said. But, just go, both of you. They left the room. I had never been so angry. My feelings of betrayal exploded uncontrollably. I couldn't stop it. Kay and Mike having an affair. Why hadn't I suspected it from the beginning? Mike is of the opposite sex. Does a best friend of the opposite sex exist? But strangely, I had trusted Mike. That's why it hurt even more. I had always wanted children. Alone in the room, I cried. How stupid of me. After about an hour alone, I decided to leave the lodge in Asheville. It was chilly in the early morning. The cold wind seemed to pierce my heart. Mike had already paid for the lodge. I'll get every penny of alimony. I took the train back home. As I started to calm down and plan to talk things over with Kay, I found she had left with all her belongings. Reluctantly, I called Mike. It's me, John. I'm really sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to cause a misunderstanding. I'll talk to you later about this, Mike. Right now, I can't find Kay. Do you know where she is? No, I haven't seen her since then. Okay, thanks. Wait, what? Maybe she's at Emily's. Emily? Yes, I'll try there. I didn't want to talk more with Mike, so I hung up abruptly. I called Emily. Sure enough, Kay was at her place. I went over to talk to Kay. She continued to deny everything. Emily excused herself because it was a marital problem. She left us to talk alone. I lost my temper earlier. I'm sorry for overreacting, but you're the one who betrayed me. I want the truth. How long have you and Mike been involved? No matter how many times you ask, Mike and I are just friends. Kay, there's a limit to lying. Tell me the truth. There's nothing between me and Mike. Really? Then her phone rang. It was Mike. Answer it. Not now. If there's nothing to hide, talk in front of me. Fine. She snapped, answering the call. Hello? Yes, I'm okay. I'll explain everything. Please don't do that. Remember what happened last time? Don't worry about me. I'll call you back later. Her concern for Mike infuriated me again. What did Mike say? I'm sorry. You were right. So you admit it? Yes. Since when? A long time ago. This is absurd. I'm sorry. I always wanted kids, 2 kids. But I never said anything to avoid hurting you. I told her. That hurt me even more. She replied. So, an affair was your answer. This betrayal is how it ends. Kay said nothing. I felt a sense of resignation towards my wife. Let's get a divorce. I'll pay back the money by working. Mike could ask his parents to cover with no problem. But I want nothing to do with you or him ever again. I won't ask for alimony. I declared, leaving the room. The next day, we went to the courthouse to file for divorce. It's been 3 years since the divorce. I haven't seen Kay since. I'm still working at the gym. I haven't gone fishing since then either. I want to, but it brings back painful memories. I guess fishing isn't the problem. Maybe it's time to start again. I thought to myself, that's when I saw a familiar face at the gym. It was Mike. John, you have a visitor. It's been a while. What brings you here now? Sorry for showing up unannounced. If you have time, maybe we could have a cup of coffee nearby. Sure. We went to a nearby diner. I'll have the chicken sandwich plate. Same for me. Right away. I really needed to talk to you today about something. What is it? I wanted to apologize for that day. I had no idea you two had divorced. You must have known. No, I really didn't. You still doubt me. I've been overseas for training to take over my family's business. The hotel management? Yes. Where to start? That day, I was consulting Kay about a marriage proposal I received. My parents wanted me to marry a daughter of a financier, but I didn't want to get married. Because of your relationship with Kay? No, no. Hear me out. It's not that I didn't want to get married. I couldn't marry a woman. I might look like a man, but I've always felt like a woman inside. So you're... Yes, exactly. I've felt this way since I can remember. I've been struggling with the conflict between my body and my feelings. My parents noticed I was different, but my father is very traditional and still hasn't accepted it. My mother just follows what he says. No one, not even my parents, understood me. Kay was the only one who did. That day, I was torn between agreeing to the arranged marriage or refusing it and going abroad. If I refused, I might be disowned by my parents. Going abroad meant I would have no one on my side. It was a lonely thought, being away from Kay. That's why you said it would be lonely to part ways. I've always hidden my gender dysphoria for the sake of my family. I've been suppressing my true feelings, wearing clothes I didn't want to wear, speaking words I didn't want to say. I hid it all through school life, but I couldn't bear it when it came to romantic feelings. I wrote a letter to a boy I liked and put it in his locker. He replied, calling me to the back of the school. I was excited, but when I got there, several boys were waiting. They laughed and dressed me to prove I was different and took pictures. Even the boy I liked joined in, calling me disgusting. That's terrible. Nobody understood me. When I finally mustered the courage, this was the result. Somehow, I ended up on the rooftop, thinking of ending my life. But then, Kay stopped me. She and I had known each other since kindergarten, but we never really talked much. I was shy and quiet. She was beautiful, smart, everyone's idol. She took my hand, led me to the classroom, and read the letter out loud in front of the boy I liked, who had a crush on her. The boy's cheeks turned bright red and shouted at her to stop reading. She finished, tore up the letter. It doesn't matter what you look like. He is a million times better than someone with a rotten core. I like Mike so much more than you. Then she took my hand, and we walked away. She sounds like a hero. To me, she was. We started talking every day after that. Kay sort of knew about my gender dysphoria all along. Thanks to her, the bullies stopped bothering me, and school became enjoyable. All that happened to you. Even after graduation, I couldn't come out because of my parents, so I've been living with this secret. It's been really tough. I couldn't stand up to my parents, and occasionally, I sought advice from Kay. That day, she also shared about her marriage and fertility issues with me. I wanted to apologize after you heard us talking, but I had to refuse the marriage proposal that day. If I missed a chance, I would have been under my parents' control again. So, it was like that. You two were just friends. It was all my misunderstanding. Of course, Kay and I are of opposite sex. Anyone would doubt it. You weren't wrong. But Kay never talked about me. She believed you would understand and trust her. I see. I only found out the truth recently. When I returned to my hometown, I met Kay's parents and learned about the divorce and that she had a child. What? You didn't know? I was speechless. Given my past suicidal thoughts, Kay never spoke about my gender dysphoria to anyone, probably not even to you. I think she's still waiting for you, hoping you'd return. After meeting her parents, I left without seeing Kay. I came back to apologize to you and tell you the whole story. Thank you for sharing such a painful story. I appreciate it. It's my fault. Please go see her soon. Right. I wanted to go see Kay immediately. I drove to her parents' house. Her parents were surprised to see me. Please let me talk to your daughter. Kay came out of the house. Let's talk outside. We walked to a nearby park. All the while, I pondered how to apologize to Kay. I hadn't trusted her, harbored insecurities in our marriage, and I failed to understand her struggles. Maybe if I had listened more, she would have told me about Mike. You came because Mike told you, didn't you? Yes. Mom and Dad must have told him everything, even though I kept silent. You heard about Mike? Yes, he told me. I'm sure you were surprised. I was. But more than that, I realized I owed you an apology. People believe what they see. Anyone might have doubted me and Mike. But I always thought, deep down, you would trust me. But you didn't. I couldn't stand the assumptions about our childlessness too. I'm truly sorry. Looking back, I realize I was also at fault. I didn't talk about Mike and just acted like we were just girlfriends. I couldn't share about Mike. He thinks he saved me, but it was the other way around. I was feeling the same way he did at that time. What? My parents' business was failing and we had debts. They were constantly fighting. My dad became erratic and I was lonely. That's when I saved Mike. He was so grateful and always wanted to thank me. His help got my dad's business back on track. I couldn't talk to anyone about my feelings, but Mike was different. Even after my parents remarried, he listened to my complicated feelings. So, I wanted to support him in return. That's why I never told you. I realized too late that I couldn't go back. I thought you'd be happier with someone who could give you children. And then, ironically, I found out I was pregnant after the divorce. I've been raising our child alone. Recently, I started to hope that maybe you'd come back for us, even though it seemed impossible. I've come back. I exclaimed loudly. Yes. I'm sorry I made you wait. Kay's mother appeared with a child who ran towards us. Halfway through, the child let go and ran by himself. Tyler, do you know who this is? Dad? I was stunned. I told him his dad was working far away, believing you'd come back someday. I see. Tyler, I'm sorry I made you wait. Dad, you're home. I'm home. I hugged my son, wiping away tears. Kay cried too. Thank you for waiting. I'm not perfect, but let's be a family again. I'll never hurt you again, and I will protect you too with my life. Kay cried and nodded. I took Tyler's hand, and we walked home together. Is 3 years a long or short time? I am ready to make up for lost time with abundant love. I will never. I'm Mike Harrison, 50 years old. Just an average office worker. I live with my wife, Maggie, who's 10 years younger than me, and our 20-year-old daughter, Karen. Tomorrow is my wife's birthday. I plan to take her to the aquarium she's always wanted to go to. And for dinner, I've booked a table at a French restaurant and bought her a gift. Plus, I've got another surprise for her tomorrow. Can't wait to tell her. I bet she's going to be over the moon. A few days ago, when I told Karen about it, she said, I hope Mom will love it, giving it her seal of approval. But something seemed off. Normally my daughter is very energetic, but she seemed down. So I asked her if something happened at her college. After pondering for a moment, she replied, nothing, just a bit tired. I hope that's all it is. But I told her, if anything's bothering you, just tell me, okay? I'd do anything for you. She nodded with watery eyes. Maybe she had a fight with a friend, or someone dumped her or something. Kids don't necessarily want to open up to their parents always, so I decided to give her some space. Because of my frequent business trips, I often leave Maggie and Karen feeling lonely. That's why I want to make her birthday special. I only told Maggie to keep her day free tomorrow, so she might have guessed something, but I'll tell her the plan when I get home tonight. I'm sure she'll be thrilled. Man, I'm already so excited. Wait, why isn't my computer working? One of my colleagues said there was an internet system outage. I can't work like this, and suddenly we had the afternoon off. Thought of heading home, but since I had the time, I decided to hit the mall to buy a new outfit for tomorrow. And would you believe it? I spotted Maggie there. Hey, I was about to call out when I noticed her with a young man I'd never seen before. What's going on? Surely, she's not having an affair, right? Even though I reassured myself, I couldn't help but follow them discreetly. However, shockingly, they started walking arm in arm like a couple. I kept hoping I was misunderstanding the situation, but then they entered a hotel. My heart raced so fast I could hear it pounding in my ears. Why didn't I confront her earlier? No, I was too stunned to act. Frozen with shock, I watched as an hour later, Maggie and the man came out of the hotel. Mustering up courage, I approached my wife and asked, Maggie, what are you doing here? She momentarily looked shocked and then lowered her eyes. The man with her hurriedly left my presence. Going into a hotel with a man in broad daylight? What's going on? Explain. She responded, quite nonchalantly. It's just one affair. Don't overreact. And to think she was really having an affair. It felt like I'd been hit in the head with a hammer. Such was my shock. I felt so dizzy, almost as if I was going to collapse. I tried hard to pull myself together. When I told my wife we should go home and talk, she said she didn't want to be blamed and would go to her parents' house today. Are you kidding me? I exclaimed loudly. Next thing I knew, she shouted, I've had enough. Ignoring my protests, she hopped into a taxi and left. I ran after her immediately but lost sight of her. However, since she mentioned going to her parents, I figured I could confront her there later. That's what I was thinking at the moment. More than that, does once mean she cheated for the first time today? What did I do wrong? Lost in my thoughts, I trudged back home and entered the living room. Seeing my downtrodden face, my daughter looked at me with concern. Dad, what's going on? Your face is so pale. Oh, there's been a bit of a situation. I have no choice but to answer like this. I can't tell her that mom has been having an affair. So, in a split second, I come up with a lie. Your grandma isn't feeling well, so mom wanted to take care of her. It's been quite a situation. It was really tough. It was so exhausting. When I said that, my daughter, Karen, replied, "Oh, really?" But she seemed to sense something. "Are you lying? Did you actually see mom cheating?" When I asked her what she was basing that on, she showed me something. It was evidence that my wife was cheating. I was at a loss for words, covering my mouth in shock. Karen then told me she had known about her mom's affair for a while. The shock was too much, and I couldn't even speak. And the only one who didn't know was me. I was in a daze for a while, but I knew I had to talk to my wife. I tried calling her, but it seemed like she blocked me because the call didn't even ring. With no other option, I called my wife's parents' house. Even though she should have been there by now, they said she hadn't arrived yet. Where could she possibly have gone? Could she have gone back to that other man from earlier? As I was worried not knowing her whereabouts, my daughter said, "I can find out where mom is. Just give me a minute." With that, she quickly checked the location services on her smartphone. To my surprise, she was at an apartment building nearby. Moreover, through the timeline feature, we could see where she had been all day. I was amazed by my daughter's quick thinking, but I decided to go to that apartment. After waiting for about 30 minutes, I saw my wife come out of the apartment with that same man. She looked utterly surprised, probably never imagining I'd find out where she was. As soon as she saw me, she looked shocked. The man quickly retreated back into the apartment. I can't forgive her. I can't be with her anymore. Unable to hold back, I confronted her about getting a divorce. "So, you're getting together with him?" I said. She replied, "Remarrying him is not an option. After all, he has a wife and kids." I was taken aback to learn they were both cheating on their spouses. It's disrespectful to their family to even come into their home. I retorted. She explained, "This is a vacation home he's renting. I didn't care about that. Arguing in front of the apartment would just cause a scene, so I suggested we move elsewhere to talk." She snapped back, "I've had enough of your lectures. I don't want to hear it," and tried to walk away again. At that moment, our daughter showed up from behind and urged her to talk things out. With both Karen and I holding on to her, we made our way to a nearby park and took a seat on a bench. Without hesitation, my wife spoke words I couldn't believe. "I'll gladly get a divorce. I've been patient all these years, but I can't stand being the wife of a dead-end office worker. And you know what? You're just an old geezer who's not good enough for me." She had the nerve to say that. How shameless can she be? Just then, a voice came from behind. That's right. Turning around, for some reason, my mom was there. Had she just happened to be passing by? After hearing my mom's words, my wife sarcastically said, "Well, isn't that surprising? I always took you for a dim-witted old bat. But seems you realized a gorgeous woman like me is way out of league for a scrubby mop like your son." As my daughter and I were taken aback, my mom sharply retorted to my wife, "A woman like you, who can cheat without a second thought, is certainly not a good match for my sincere son. Are you so dense that you can't even understand that? Maybe you've got rocks in your head." "What did you just say?" my wife exclaimed, visibly angered. After a brief pause, she continued, "How did you know about my affair?" My mom then explained that my daughter had confided in her about it some time ago. "Wait, what?" my wife exclaimed in shock and confusion. It seemed she hadn't realized that our daughter had known. She assumed that it was something my daughter had followed me to because I couldn't come to the apartment alone with the interloper. Moreover, when my wife and her lover came out, my mom was on her way to our house after getting a call from our daughter. Mom said that as she passed by the park, she saw us and decided to approach. Despite all this, my wife turned to Karen and accused, "Did you set this up? Such an unbelievable woman. Enough already. Can't you see how much our daughter has been hurt by discovering her mom's affairs?" And then, to add insult to injury, she lashes out at me with words like, "Shut up, and you're worthless." It's obvious that our relationship is beyond repair. My wife agreed to a divorce, so we've decided to part ways. Karen also agrees with this decision. When I informed my wife that I knew she'd been having affairs with 5 different men over the past 3 years, she feigned ignorance with it. "What? What are you talking about?" I let her know that I've seen the photos on her smartphone as evidence of her past affairs, hinting that she might be looking at paying a hefty alimony. In response, she frantically began pressing buttons on her phone. Peeking over, I noticed she was deleting the pictures. "Doing that won't help. When I told her I had everything backed up, she exclaimed, "What? What's that about?" She then lashed out, saying, "You're playing dirty." I snapped back, "Don't you dare get mad at me." And she recoiled, clearly startled. I haven't told my wife, but it wasn't me who did all this. It was all thanks to our daughter, Karen. Karen had been suspecting her mom's infidelity for a while and accessed her account from her own computer to verify her suspicions by checking the photos. She saved those incriminating pictures on her computer. After a particularly rough day, I came home and Karen showed me those pictures. The images were so shocking that I could hardly bear to look at them. I can't help but feel heartbroken thinking about how distraught and saddened Karen must have felt seeing her mom like that. Though she saved them for my sake, just thinking about what went through her mind when she stored those images on her computer makes my heart heavy. My wife has always struggled with tech stuff, especially smartphones and computers. Every time she got a new device, Karen would help her set it up. That's how Karen knew about her mom's account details. Upon realizing her secret was out, my wife stared blankly into space, completely shell-shocked. She looked just as devastated as I had been earlier. And then, to add to her distress, Mom delivered the final blow. "You could have been rich, but you missed out on a fortune. Ha, 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 ha." My wife, looking puzzled, turned to my mom. I decided to spill the beans on the secret I had planned to reveal on her birthday tomorrow. Turns out, my mom had won a whopping $7 million from the lottery ticket she bought last month. Moreover, she had promised to give that money to my dad and our family, and had already made preparations to hand it over to us. After hearing this, my wife quickly said she'd reconsider the divorce, but I made it clear that me and Karen's feelings remained unchanged. Karen spoke for my wife, who was very upset with me. "For your birthday tomorrow, Dad had planned a whole day for you, including a visit to the aquarium and a fancy French dinner. With such a loyal and honest man as our father, how could you even think of cheating on him? It's embarrassing to think you're my own mom." Then, Karen confessed that she had known about her mom's affair for a while but couldn't say anything. As she finished speaking, she ran to my mom, hugged her tight, and burst into tears. It must have been so hard for her. She must have been suffering in silence for so long. "I'm so sorry. I truly am. I'm sorry for not noticing." I gently touched her shoulder and felt her body tremble. I'll never forgive my wife for putting Karen through this. I no longer wanted her in our home, so I called her parents and explained everything, asking them to pick her up. My in-laws assured me they'd make her face the consequences and took her with them. After watching them leave, Karen said through her tears, "Thank you, Dad, for always working so hard for us. I've always admired and respected you. I want to repay your kindness from now on." I couldn't help but cry at her heartfelt words. What a kind-hearted girl she is. Even though she must have been the one most hurt, I shared my feelings with her. "It's me who should repay you, Karen. I don't know where I'd be without you. I'm truly sorry. It must have been tough for you. From now on, I'll protect you no matter what. I'd do anything for you. So, please, don't suffer on your own anymore." Karen responded, "You said that before, didn't you? But seeing how genuine my feelings were," she said with tearful eyes, "it makes me so happy to hear that from you." I just wanted to reassure her. Suggesting we head back home, we returned with my mom. Once we got home, Mom prepared a heartfelt warm meal for us. Taking a sip of the soup, it oddly comforted me. Karen seemed to feel the same, and said, "Grandma's soup is really tasty, isn't it?" "Seeing us like this," Mom said, "eat plenty and get a good night's sleep. Day by day, your hearts will heal." She continued to prepare more dishes for us as she spoke. Only after a short time, the table was filled with food. "Oh my, did I make too much? Just eat more. Here, pass me your bowl. I'll serve you some more rice." Handing over my bowl, she piled it high with more rice. It's probably her way of showing care and love. I appreciate it. To be honest, I was so choked up that it was hard to eat, but I wanted to respond to my mom's feelings. Karen seemed to feel the same. We ate until our bellies were bursting. After eating so much, a wave of exhaustion hit both of us. Karen and I dozed off on the sofa, and Mom gently draped a blanket over us. Mumbling a soft, "Thank you," she responded. "It's the least I can do. I'd do anything for you too." Ah, I remembered. Those words were something she always used to say. It's no wonder we say the same things. We're family after all. Today felt like such a long day. I think I'll catch some sleep for a bit. With that, I quietly closed my eyes. The next morning, I was awakened by the smell of Mom's soup. For a moment, I thought my mom was still around, but it was Karen who had prepared breakfast. Seeing me awake, she greeted, "Good morning, Dad. Why don't you take a shower while I finish up the food?" I headed to the bathroom. When I returned, breakfast was set on the table. While eating, I commented. This is delicious, honey. Thank you, she replied, looking a bit bashful. Later on, wanting to avoid any direct confrontation with my wife, I wrote up divorce papers and sent them to my in-laws. I agreed to have my attorney handle the alimony and get her consent for the payments. Karen, sensing my distress, would cook delicious meals for me every day and even pack lunch. Having her by my side has truly been a saving grace. I vowed to protect her no matter what. After discussing with Karen, we decided to sell the house I once shared with my wife, and with the money received from my mom, we purchased an apartment. Karen decided to save all the money she got from my mom for emergencies. I can't help but admire how mature and ever since we moved to this quaint suburb, Jenna's eyes had sparkled with a different light. She found her haven in an exclusive book club, a sanctuary for avid readers like herself. Initially, it seemed like a blessing. She'd return from the meetings with a vibrant energy, her laughter filling our home like music. But as months rolled by, I noticed subtle changes. She'd whisper on the phone, smile secretively at text messages, and our conversations, they just dwindled. One night, she came home past midnight, her eyes dodging mine. The discussion went late. Love, she murmured, her voice a hushed escape. My heart wanted to believe her, but my mind, it churned with doubts. I decided to follow her the next time she left for the club. The evening air was crisp as I trailed her car from a safe distance. She drove to the heart of the city, parking outside an old Victorian building, its walls echoing stories of a bygone era. The place didn't look like any book club I'd ever seen. Through the dimly lit windows, I could see silhouettes, people moving with an odd familiarity. I slipped in quietly, finding a spot behind a row of antique bookshelves. My heart raced as I peered through the gaps. There she was, my Jenna, her eyes locked with a man I'd never seen. They spoke in hushed tones, their hands touching briefly, a gesture so intimate it clawed at my chest. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of truth I had just witnessed. As I prepared to confront them, a sudden commotion erupted. The group gathered around something, their voices a mix of shock and excitement. I strained to see, but before I could understand, Jenna's eyes met mine across the room. Time stood still, her expression a tangled web of fear and surprise. I retreated hastily, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. What was this place? Who was that man? And most importantly, what was Jenna hiding? Outside, the cold night air felt harsh against my skin, a stark contrast to the fire burning in my chest. I knew then, this was just the beginning. There were secrets lurking in the shadows of that book club, secrets that threatened to shatter the life I thought we had. As I drove back home, a single, haunting question echoed in my mind. What happens next? Like, share, and subscribe if you're hooked and can't wait to uncover the secrets of the double life of a book club. The next few days were a blur. My mind kept replaying that night, each memory a shard piercing through my heart. Jenna's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She was on edge, her eyes darting nervously whenever her phone buzzed. It was as if she was guarding a sinister secret, one that could crumble our world. I had to know more. I couldn't let this gnawing suspicion eat away at me. So, I decided to delve deeper into the mystery of the book club. My first stop was the local library. If this club was as exclusive as Jenna claimed, someone there must have heard about it. The librarian, a kindly old woman with a penchant for mystery novels, raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the club. Ah, that club, she said, a note of caution in her voice. It's not what it appears to be. They're a selective bunch, not just anyone can join. Her words were cryptic, but they fueled my resolve. That evening, as Jenna prepared for another meeting, I feigned exhaustion and retreated to our bedroom. As soon as I heard the car pull away, I sprang into action. Dressed in dark clothing, I headed back to the Victorian building, determination my silent companion. I crept in, unnoticed, finding a new hiding spot. The group was already gathered, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of antique lamps. I strained to listen, catching fragments of conversations that made no sense. They weren't discussing books, they were planning something. Something big. My heart pounded as I watched Jenna. She seemed different here, more alive, more dangerous. The man from before was there too, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. A surge of jealousy and anger washed over me, but I forced myself to stay focused. Suddenly, the room went silent. A new figure had entered, someone I couldn't quite see. The group huddled around, listening intently. The air was thick with anticipation. I leaned in closer, desperate to catch their words. That's when disaster struck. A bookshelf I was leaning against gave way with a loud crash, sending books tumbling down. All eyes turned towards me, Shock and recognition mirrored in Jenna's eyes. I scrambled to my feet, my cover blown. The group advanced towards me, their expressions a mix of anger and curiosity. Jenna's voice cut through the chaos. "He's my husband." The room fell silent. The mysterious figure stepped forward, his identity sending shockwaves through my very being. It was David, Jenna's ex-fiancé, whom she had often mentioned in passing, always with a hint of unresolved emotions. His presence sent 1,000 questions racing through my mind. Why was he here, and what role did he play in Jenna's secret life? The room was thick with tension, each person waiting for the other to break the silence. David's eyes were fixed on me, a mixture of amusement and challenge in his gaze. "So, you're the husband Jenna can't stop talking about," he said, his voice smooth, yet laced with something sinister. Jenna stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "Let's talk outside," she whispered, grabbing my arm. I followed, numb and confused. Outside, under the starless sky, Jenna's facade crumbled. Tears streamed down her face as she began to unravel the truth. The book club was a front, a gathering of individuals bound by a shared past and a dangerous secret. David, their charismatic leader, had lured Jenna back into his world, a world she thought she had escaped when she left him for a simpler, honest life with me. The club? "It's not just about books or affairs," Jenna sobbed. It's much bigger. We're planning to expose a massive corporate scandal, one that David and I uncovered years ago. But we needed a group, a cover, and I got pulled back in. I was stunned. The betrayal I had imagined was of a different kind, a deeper deception that entangled Jenna in a web of danger and moral dilemmas. David's plan was to use the club as a cover to leak the scandal to the press, but the stakes were high. Anyone involved was at risk. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice a mix of anger and hurt. "I wanted to protect you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could keep my two worlds separate, but I was wrong." The weight of her confession hung heavy between us. I was torn between the love for my wife and the shock of her double life. Just then, a black car pulled up. Its windows rolled down, revealing a face that sent a chill down my spine. It was. In the car sat Mr. Hargrove, the CEO of the corporation entangled in the scandal Jenna and David were trying to expose. His cold, calculating eyes bore into us, sending a wave of dread through my body. How did he find us? The implications were terrifying. "Jenna, we need to talk." Hargrove's voice was calm, but there was an underlying threat that couldn't be ignored. Jenna stiffened, her resolve faltering under his gaze. He stepped out of the car, his presence dominating. "You're playing a dangerous game. I suggest you and your little group reconsider your actions," he said, his eyes flickering to me, assessing. Jenna gathered her courage, her voice steady. "We won't be intimidated. The truth needs to come out." Hargrove chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Be careful, Jenna. You're not the only one with something to lose." With a final piercing look, he got back into his car and drove away. The encounter left us shaken. Jenna clung to me, her body trembling. "What have I gotten us into?" she whispered. We drove home in silence, the night's events weighing heavily on us. Once home, Jenna revealed everything. The club, under David's leadership, had been working to compile irrefutable evidence of Hargrove's corrupt practices. Jenna's role had been to help decode complex financial documents, thanks to her background in finance. "But why involve your ex?" I asked, the jealousy and confusion evident in my voice. Jenna sighed. "David was the one who discovered the scandal initially. We had to work together, despite our past. It was never about rekindling anything with him." I wanted to believe her, but the sting of betrayal, real or perceived, was hard to shake off. The next day, as I grappled with the revelations, I received an anonymous email. It contained a single file, marked urgent. Hesitantly, I opened it and found myself staring at a detailed report of Hargrove's illicit activities, along with a note. "Expose him, or more than your marriage is at stake." The gravity of the situation was now undeniable. We were in too deep, caught in a dangerous game where the stakes were life and death. As I pondered our next move, a sudden knock at the door jolted me. I opened it to find. Standing at the door was a stern-faced man I didn't recognize, his eyes scanning the room behind me with an unsettling intensity. "I need to speak with Jenna," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for questions. As Jenna approached, her face paled upon seeing him. "Detective Miller," she greeted, her voice a shaky whisper. The detective's presence was ominous, hinting at trouble far beyond our fears. Detective Miller wasted no time. "We've been monitoring Hargrove and his associates, including your book club, he began, his eyes fixed on Jenna. You're dangerously close to a situation that's much larger than a corporate scandal. Jenna and I exchanged worried glances. The detective's revelation meant our actions were no longer hidden in the shadows. They were under the scrutiny of law enforcement. Miller continued, we can offer protection, but in exchange, we need everything you have on Hargrove. And we need your cooperation to bring him down. The offer was a lifeline amidst the chaos. Jenna nodded, the burden of her secret life finally lifting. She agreed to work with the detective, promising to deliver the evidence the next day. After Miller left, Jenna and I had a long, heart-to-heart conversation. It was time to lay all cards on the table, to rebuild the trust that had been strained by secrets and lies. We vowed to face the coming storm together. The next morning, as we prepared to hand over the evidence to Detective Miller, an encrypted message popped up on Jenna's phone. It was from David, urgent and foreboding. Meet me immediately. It's about Hargrove. Don't bring the evidence. Jenna's eyes met mine, a storm of uncertainties swirling in them. We knew meeting David could be a trap, but what if he had critical information? With heavy hearts, we decided to split up. Jenna would meet David while I would deliver the evidence to Detective Miller. It was a risk, but one we felt compelled to take. As I drove towards the police station, my mind raced with possibilities. Meanwhile, Jenna headed to an old warehouse, the designated meeting spot. When I handed the evidence to Miller, his grim expression did little to ease my anxiety. We'll handle it from here, he said. Go home and wait for Jenna. But Jenna didn't come home. Hours passed, and her phone went straight to voicemail. A sinking feeling took hold of me. Something was terribly wrong. Rushing to the warehouse, my worst fears materialized. The place was deserted, a single piece of paper lying in the center of the room. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was a note from David. You should have trusted me, not the police. Jenna's gone, and it's your fault. Panic coursed through me as I stared at the note. Jenna was missing, and I was clueless about her whereabouts. David's betrayal stung deep, but there was no time to dwell on it. I had to find Jenna. Racing back home, I called Detective Miller, but it went to voicemail. Desperation mounting, I started piecing together every clue, every conversation that might lead me to Jenna. Then it struck me, the book club. Perhaps someone there knew where David might have taken her. I headed back to the Victorian building, the place where this tangled web began. The members were gathered, their faces etched with concern and confusion. Upon seeing me, they fell silent. I need to find Jenna, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. David has taken her, and I believe he's planning something drastic. The group exchanged glances, the tension palpable. Then, one of them, a woman named Lisa, stepped forward. I think I know where they might be, she said hesitantly. David mentioned a safe house once, a place he used when things got complicated. Grasping onto this sliver of hope, I followed Lisa to a secluded cabin hidden deep in the woods. The place looked abandoned, but a faint light flickered through the windows. We approached cautiously, the silence of the woods eerie and foreboding. As we reached the door, muffled voices seeped through. I recognized Jenna's voice, her tone frantic. Bursting through the door, I was met with a scene that chilled me to the bone. Jenna was bound to a chair, her eyes wide with fear. David stood over her, a crazed look in his eyes. In his hand was a flash drive, likely containing copies of the evidence against Hargrove. Stop this, David, I yelled, my heart pounding. David turned, a twisted smile on his face. You don't understand, do you? This was never just about exposing Hargrove. It's bigger than that, and Jenna, she's the key. Before he could continue, the sound of sirens pierced the air. The police, led by Detective Miller, swarmed the cabin. In the chaos, David made a break for it, clutching the flash drive. I lunged at him, and in the scuffle, the flash drive flew from his grasp and slid under a nearby cabinet. The police apprehended David, and I rushed to Jenna, untying her. Her relief at being safe was palpable, but our victory was short-lived. As the police searched the cabin, a disturbing discovery was made. Hidden in a concealed compartment were documents and evidence linking not only Hargrove but also high-ranking officials in a web of corruption far more extensive than we had imagined. Detective Miller approached us, his expression grave. You two have unearthed a conspiracy that goes to the very top. You're not safe. We need to get you into protective custody immediately. As we were escorted out, I glanced back at the cabin. The flash drive still lay hidden, its secrets untapped. But for now, Jenna and I had a more pressing concern: staying alive. As Detective Miller ushered us into the back of an unmarked police car, the reality of our situation sank in. We were now key witnesses in a case that reached the highest echelons of power. Fear and uncertainty clouded my thoughts, but Jenna's hand in mine was a comforting anchor. We were taken to a secure location, a nondescript house in a quiet neighborhood. Miller briefed us on the situation. You two have kicked a hornet's nest. We need to keep you under the radar until the trial. It's not just about Hargrove anymore. There are others, powerful people who will do anything to keep this quiet. The days turned into weeks as we lived in our protective bubble. We had each other, but the isolation was stifling. We were cut off from the world, with only occasional visits from Detective Miller bringing updates and supplies. One evening, as we sat discussing our future, Miller arrived with news. We've been through the evidence you provided. It's solid, but without the flash drive, our case isn't airtight. We need that final piece to bring the whole house of cards down. The flash drive. It was still hidden in the cabin. A plan began to form in my mind. I knew it was risky, but it was a risk we had to take. With Miller's reluctant agreement, we devised a covert operation to retrieve the drive. Under the cover of darkness, we returned to the cabin. The place was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of our last visit. I slipped inside, my heart racing. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence. I found the cabinet and retrieved the flash drive, a small object holding so much power. Just as I was about to leave, a sudden noise startled me. Footsteps outside. I peeked through the window and saw shadowy figures approaching. We weren't alone. Quickly, I signaled to Jenna and Miller, and we hid in the shadows. The figures entered the cabin, their flashlights sweeping the room. They were searching for something, the flash drive. Realizing the danger, we carefully made our way out, avoiding detection. Once we were a safe distance away, Miller radioed for backup. The drive was the key to exposing the conspiracy, but we knew those implicated wouldn't stop coming after us. As we made our way back to the safe house, a new sense of determination settled over us. We were no longer just survivors. We were fighters, ready to bring the truth to light. Back at the safe house, with the flash drive securely in our possession, a sense of urgency enveloped us. Detective Miller wasted no time. He arranged for a team of experts to analyze the drive, uncovering a trove of incriminating evidence that implicated not just Hargrove but a network of corruption linking politics, finance, and the corporate world. As the trial date approached, the tension was palpable. Jenna and I were key witnesses, the linchpin in a case that could topple giants. We prepared for the courtroom, going over our testimonies, aware that every word carried immense weight. The day of the trial arrived, a day that felt more like a lives. The courthouse was a fortress, swarming with media and security. As we made our way inside, flashes of cameras and shouted questions assaulted us, but we remained focused, our resolve unwavering. The trial was a whirlwind. Prosecutors presented the evidence with precision, painting a damning picture of Hargrove and his associates. When it was our turn to testify, Jenna and I took the stand, recounting our ordeal and the evidence we had uncovered. Our words echoed in the packed courtroom, every syllable a strike against the corrupt network we had exposed. As the trial progressed, the defense tried to discredit us, painting us as unreliable, involved for personal gain. But the evidence was irrefutable. The flash drive, in particular, was a silent testament to the truth, its contents a beacon of justice. After days of intense proceedings, the jury retired to deliberate. The wait was agonizing, each passing hour a test of our patience and courage. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The jury returned, their verdict clear in their somber expressions. Guilty. The word rang through the courtroom, a sweet sound of victory and relief. Hargrove and his county conspirators were found guilty on all counts. Justice had prevailed, but the journey was far from over. As we stepped out of the courthouse, free but forever changed, we knew our lives would never be the same. We had fought against giants and emerged victorious, but at a cost. Our normal life was a distant memory, replaced by a new reality shaped by our ordeal. Detective Miller approached us, a smile of genuine respect on his face. You did good. Thanks to you, we've struck a significant blow against corruption. But be careful. People like Hargrove have long memories. As we walked away, hand in hand, a mix of emotions flooded us, triumph, relief, but also a sense of wariness. We had exposed a deep-seated corruption, but in doing so, we had also made powerful enemies. Our story had reached its conclusion, but our lives were just beginning a new chapter, one where we had to be vigilant, always aware of the shadows cast by. The clock struck 11 p.m., and the other side of the bed was still empty. Working late again, she had texted, a message that had become all too familiar over the past few weeks. I tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, telling myself it was just the demands of her new job. But things started adding up, or rather, they didn't. Her phone, once open and accessible, now required a password I didn't know. Whispered conversations in the other room and quick exits to take calls had become the norm. It wasn't just the late nights, it was the secrecy that gnawed at me. Mike said he saw her with someone at Marcos. Looked cozy. A friend's voice echoed in my head, a statement I had initially dismissed. Stress, I had convinced myself, was making me paranoid, misinterpreting innocent interactions. However, the same friend pulled me aside weeks later, his expression grave. "I've got proof," he whispered, sliding his phone across the table. The image on the screen, a candid shot of her laughing with someone I didn't recognize, felt like a punch in the gut. Confrontation was inevitable. "Is there something you need to tell me?" I asked that evening, her arrival interrupting the silence of our now cold living room. The question hung in the air, a palpable tension building between us. "There's nothing to tell. You're being paranoid," she retorted, her defense as swift as it was sharp. The denial was expected, yet it stung, the accusation of distrust adding salt to the open wound. The evidence was undeniable, yet her words attempted to sow the seed of doubt in my mind. Was I misinterpreting the situation? Or was the foundation of our marriage truly crumbling? The quest for truth became my sole focus, propelling me into a whirlwind of actions and decisions that would irreversibly change our lives. As shadows lengthened and the office buildings emptied, I found myself parked a discreet distance from her workplace. Anxiety gnawed my stomach, but determination steeled my resolve. When she finally emerged, her hurried steps didn't head towards home, but to a secluded park bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. I followed, a silent specter in her wake. There, under the guise of anonymity provided by the dimming light, she met him. Their embrace, long and tender, shattered any lingering denials within me. From behind the cover of a tree, I captured their betrayal with my phone, each click a hammer to my heart. Fueled by a mix of rage and despair, I confronted him the next day. "Stay away from my wife," I demanded, my voice a controlled calm that belied the turmoil inside. He reeled back, genuine shock etched on his features. "I thought she was single," he stammered, his admission doing little to quell the storm within me. Armed with undeniable evidence, I faced her that evening. The photos laid bare on the table between us served as the silent accuser in our confrontation. Her initial attempts at denial quickly crumbled under the weight of proof. "I felt neglected," she confessed, her voice a mix of defiance and sorrow. The words struck me, a poignant reminder of the distance that had grown between us. Our argument spiraled, a maelstrom of accusations, justifications, and hurt. Yet, beneath the tumult lay a stark realization. The foundation of our marriage had cracked, not from this singular act of betrayal, but from a gradual erosion of connection and understanding. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with pain and the daunting task of rebuilding, should we choose it. But in that moment, the immediate agony of betrayal overshadowed all else, a vivid scar upon the fabric of our shared life. The moment hung between us, charged and heavy. "You need to choose," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Her eyes, once familiar and warm, now held a tumultuous sea of indecision and fear. "Please, I need time to think," she whispered, her pleas slicing through the remnants of my resolve. That night, the walls of our home felt suffocating, each photograph a stark reminder of happier times now tainted. In search of solace, I sought refuge at a friend's house, a temporary escape from the storm that had become my life. The silence there allowed my thoughts to race, contemplating futures I had never envisioned. The following day, amidst a haze of disbelief and anger, I found myself sitting across from a lawyer, discussing divorce proceedings. "Are you sure about this?" the lawyer asked, his voice a tether to the reality of the situation. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But then, she reached out, her voice laced with regret and desperation. "It was a mistake. Can we try to fix this?" she asked. Against the counsel of friends and the jagged shards of my pride, I agreed to counseling sessions. A part of me clung to the hope of salvaging the ruins of our marriage. Counseling sessions began, a sterile room attempting to contain the raw, unruly emotions between us. She seemed distant during these sessions, her commitment as absent as the ring that once circled her finger. Doubt gnawed at me, a relentless companion whispering dark thoughts. Then, one evening, a glimpse of her phone shattered the precarious peace we had built. Messages, unmistakably planning to meet him again, flashed before my eyes, a digital confession of her unresolved feelings. The betrayal wasn't just repeated, it was deepened, reinforcing the chasm that had opened between us. Confronted with this new evidence, I was thrust back into the tempest of betrayal and hurt. The counseling, the attempts at reconciliation, all felt like a facade, a cruel charade played at the expense of my hope and forgiveness. The path forward was now shrouded in uncertainty and pain, a journey through the aftermath of broken vows and shattered trust. The air was thick with tension as we stepped out of the counselor's office, the last session ending on a note far from resolution. My mind raced, replaying the discovery of her messages, a fresh wound on an already battered heart. "We need to talk," I said, the urgency in my voice cutting through the hum of the busy street. Our conversation quickly escalated, voices rising despite the public setting. Accusations and hurt feelings spilled out, an open display of our fractured relationship. "I need space. I can't do this here," she said, turning away, leaving me standing alone amidst the chaos of our unraveling lives. The solitude of the house echoed my turmoil, a stark reminder of the chasm between us. Betrayal, once a foreign concept in our marriage, had become its defining feature. With a heavy heart, I began the daunting task of preparing for divorce, each step feeling like a betrayal of the vows we once shared. During this tumultuous time, my friend, the one who had first opened my eyes to the affair, stood by me. "You'll get through this," he assured me, a rock amidst the swirling currents of my despair. His support was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't navigating this storm alone. Amidst the paperwork and legal consultations, word reached me that she was seeking advice on how to mend the rift, to win me back. It was a sliver of hope in a dark time, yet my heart was guarded, fortified against further hurt. Then, she returned home, her presence filling the space that had grown cold in her absence. "I'm sorry, and I want to make this right," she said, her eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. The sincerity in her voice tugged at the frayed edges of my resolve. We sat down, embarking on a marathon discussion about our future, if such a thing still existed for us. The conversation was raw, a candid exploration of the pain we had inflicted upon each other and the monumental task of rebuilding trust. The path forward was fraught with uncertainty, yet the mere act of dialogue, of opening ourselves to the vulnerability of healing, felt like a tentative step towards reconciliation. As the night wore on, our words carved out a tentative ceasefire, a fragile foundation upon which to rebuild. The journey ahead promised to be arduous, marked by moments of doubt and fear, but the possibility of redemption, however distant, sparked a faint glow of hope in the darkness. The decision to give our marriage another chance felt like stepping onto uncertain ground, but it was a step I was willing to take. We laid down clear boundaries, a framework within which we hoped to rebuild what had been damaged. It was a tentative beginning, but it was a thaw. We invested time in each other, carving out moments from our days to reconnect. I noticed a shift in her behavior. She was more open, more willing to share her thoughts and feelings. It was a change that breathed a cautious hope into the hollow spaces of our relationship. To further this newfound connection, we planned a weekend getaway. It was an opportunity to step away from the reminders of our past struggles and focus solely on us. Those days were a blend of conversations, laughter, and shared silences that spoke volumes. It felt like we were rediscovering each other, finding new depths in familiar waters. However, upon our return, a shadow fell across the brightness of our rekindling. She fell ill, a persistent malaise that prompted a visit to the doctor. The atmosphere was tense, charged with an unspoken fear of what might be uncovered. The news she brought back shattered the fragile peace we had built. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words hanging between us like a sword. The joy that should have accompanied such news was absent, replaced by a heavy silence. The timing was suspicious, a cruel reminder of the chasm that had once divided us. The turmoil of emotions was overwhelming. The specter of past betrayals loomed large, casting doubt on the paternity of the child. It was a question I wished I never had to ask, a doubt that pained me to voice. "We need a paternity test," I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. Demanding a paternity test was a decision that came from a place of hurt and uncertainty. It was a step back into the shadows, even as we had been moving towards the light. The future of our family, our marriage, hinged on the results of that test. It was a moment that held both the possibility of complete shattering and the hope for a stronger rebuilding, but it was a step we had to take to move forward, wherever that path might lead. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last, as we awaited the results of the paternity test. The air in our home was thick with the tension of unspoken fears and the weight of impending truths. Our conversations, once on the mend towards normalcy, now skirted around the giant elephant in the room, each of us lost in our whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Then, the call came, a moment frozen in time. "I'm sorry," the voice on the other end said. "The results confirm you are not the father." The words struck with the force of a sledgehammer, shattering the fragile hope I had harbored. In that instant, the foundation of our rebuilt trust crumbled into dust. The revelation plunged us into a crisis unlike any we had faced before. Our marriage, already scarred by past betrayals, now teetered on the brink of an abyss. The future, once again, became a murky path, obscured by hurt and uncertainty. In the midst of this storm, she stood before me, tears in her eyes, voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. Please, can we find a way to get through this? Can we raise this child together?" Her plea cut through me, a stark reminder of the love that had once bound us, now intertwined with the pain of betrayal. Torn between the remnants of that love and the sharp sting of betrayal, I found myself at a crossroads. The decision before me was monumental, not just a matter of my relationship with her, but of the innocent life caught in our turmoil. Seeking guidance, I turned to friends and family, each conversation adding layers to my internal struggle. Opinions varied widely, from staunch support for a fresh start to warnings against the consequences of unresolved issues. The cacophony of advice left me more conflicted, a heart divided by love and hurt. In search of clarity, we returned to counseling, this time to navigate the treacherous waters of this new reality. The sessions were intense, raw opening of wounds and exploration of possibilities. We dissected our feelings, the deep-seated hurt, the lingering love, and the potential for forgiveness. Each session peeled back layers of pain and doubt, revealing glimpses of understanding and empathy. Yet, the journey was far from over. The path ahead promised challenges and required a strength I wasn't sure I possessed. But amidst the turmoil, a flicker of hope remained, a beacon guiding us through the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The decision to forgive wasn't made in a moment of clarity or a burst of enlightenment. It was a gradual realization, a deep understanding that the child, innocent in our turmoil, deserved a chance at a stable, loving family. My wife's plea for forgiveness, her remorse palpable, tipped the scales. Love, I realized, wasn't just a feeling but a choice to rebuild from the ruins of betrayal. Informing our families about the situation was our next step, one fraught with apprehension. The reactions were as varied as the individuals themselves, ranging from supportive understanding to palpable disappointment. Yet, beneath the cacophony of opinions, there was a thread of hope that we clung to, a belief in the possibility of redemption and healing. Preparations for the child's arrival marked a time of cautious optimism. Amidst discussions of names and nursery colors, there was an underlying current of our ongoing healing process. My wife severed all contact with the child's biological father, a decision that was both painful and necessary, underscoring her commitment to our family. The birth of the child was a watershed moment, bringing with it a deluge of emotions. The challenges were manifold, from sleepless nights to navigating our roles as parents under the shadow of past events. Yet, there were moments of undeniable joy, the first smile, the first steps, each a milestone that brought us closer together. Trust, once shattered, was painstakingly rebuilt, day by day, action by action. We focused on the well-being of our family, understanding that the foundation we laid now was critical for the future. Counseling sessions continued, a space where we could navigate our feelings and learn to communicate more effectively. The experience, as harrowing as it was, tested the very fabric of our marriage. Yet, rather than succumbing to the strain, we emerged stronger, more resilient. The commitment to each other, once questioned, was now renewed, fortified by the trials we had overcome. Accepting the child as my own was a journey in itself. Fatherhood, I discovered, transcends biology. It's a role defined by love, responsibility, and the unwavering support one provides. Embracing this role, I found a sense of purpose and fulfillment that transcended the initial turmoil. In the end, we emerged not unscathed, but undeniably stronger. Our marriage, tested by the fiercest of storms, stood as a testament to our resilience and commitment. The road ahead was still paved with challenges, but together, we faced it with a family stronger for the Have you ever considered that apartment life may be more than simply loud parties? Until I learned the reality about what was happening outside the walls of my apartment, I assumed that my neighbors were only complaining about the noise. My wife was having an affair with 2 other men, and I found out because they were spending the nights at my apartment. When I learned, I was astonished, but I made the decision to learn more and try to answer the riddle. I'll share this tale with you today, along with how I learned the reality of what was happening in my flat. Jaeger met Christina when he was already 33 years old. His eyes were drawn from the start to a gorgeous but slender, sickly-looking girl, out of sympathy and a desire to assist, and when they subsequently communicated and corresponded a bit, he understood he had fallen in love. Since Igor was in the military and frequently traveling, they kept in touch with Christina via social media. Christina worked as a social worker, taking care of the elderly. Almost every night, they would communicate through video chat, exchange the latest events, express their opinions, and even get a little wicked. Jaeger said, "I'll be there soon, and I'll kiss you." He sincerely missed Christina, and it had been 3 months since their last encounter. She said with a smile, "I can't wait," and Jaeger felt warm within. Jaeger was eager to pop the question to his lover while he was in town after seeing her upon his arrival. At the conclusion of the evening, he presented Christina a ring. He had planned a lovely celebratory supper for her at his house. She readily agreed without hesitation. Even before he could take the ring out of his pocket, he assumed she had said yes. He had a very simple wedding, brought his new bride into his flat, and then went once again for work. Christina felt miserable and lonely. She didn't fully appreciate the impact of her husband's presence in her life from phone calls and regular networking. One day, a friend extended an invitation to her for a stimulating game, assuring her wonderful company and a fun evening. Christina happily concurred. She greeted her squad after arriving at the designated location in time. There were 5 other males on the squad in addition to Christina. All of them, with the exception of Christine, attended university together and had a strong friendship. Christina requested that her buddy invite her more frequently since she enjoyed the game. She so kept herself occupied till Igor showed up. Christine abandoned the game when he was at home. She vowed to come back when Igor was gone, so the rest of the squad accepted it with grace. And that's what occurred. When Christina came back to the game that evening for the first time following the break, their team won, so they made plans to celebrate in the cafe. They stayed there until closing, and at that point, everyone in the group was inebriated. One of the males, Boris, followed Christina when it came time to depart. He had been openly flirting with her for a while, but this evening he became more daring and even kissed her. Christina phoned the man to her vacant apartment once the booze in her blood completed its job. They awoke in the same bed the next morning. Later, Boris visited her a few more times, which expertly made her lonely evenings more bearable. When Igor saw little bruises on his wife during their intimate moments, he became suspicious that something was wrong. When he inquired about their origin, Christina nervously stated that she had purchased them while attending a dancing lesson with a friend. They never brought up the topic again once Igor's vigilance was satisfied by the response. Later, Christina started having extramarital romances with 2 other members of their team in addition to Boris. When a neighbor stopped her on the stairs one day and threatened to tell Jaeger everything, she did not hesitate to bring them to her home. She first banned the trio from visiting her home, but when summer arrived, the watchful neighbor moved in with the cottage and Christina took over the old house. She twiddled her thumb at her temple and used foul language as she informed her buddy about Christina. Their interaction and participation in games came to a stop after that. Jaeger frequently saw the displeased looks of his neighbors while he was walking home. He was told by a married couple who lived directly above Jaeger and Christina's flat, and who had just had a kid, that their intimacy with his wife was particularly noisy and turbulent. He learned from them that Jaeger wasn't the only one who heard the groans. "Our apartment's groaning has drawn complaints from our neighbors. What are your thoughts about that?" That evening, he harshly questioned his wife. She was ashamed and said that she occasionally viewed intriguing films without her spouse. So to say, she did it to de-stress and raise her husband's expectations for his business trip. These comments stirred Jaeger, and he took Christina at her word. Autumn arrived. All of the city's roadways were covered with colorful leaves that had fallen from the trees. Jaeger eagerly anticipated his approaching holiday during the final days of his business trip. In order to surprise his wife, he booked a luxurious hotel stay and paid for a trip to the beach. That in mind, he made his way back home. Outside his home, he encountered Grigory Ilyich, a neighbor who had previously threatened to reveal Christina as he got out of the taxi. His expression was grave. He didn't even give Jaeger his customary greeting smile. He was greeted coldly by the neighbor, who then probed Jaeger for a while. Jaeger was surprised when the man entered the room from a distance and said, "Your wife doesn't waste any time. She's got men coming over, 3 of them." He began by talking about his life and his wife. His back collapsed as his pulse suddenly spiked. He regarded Grigory Ilyich as though he had just spoken the silliest thing possible. However, he could see by the man's entire demeanor that he was not lying. After saying thanks for the information to his neighbor, The latter yelled after him for Jaeger to make an adult introduction. The spouse then finished piecing everything together in his mind. The neighbors complained of the haymakers on his wife's body and the groans. Everything was apparent. Jaeger himself simply didn't see it, and Ilyich didn't want to either. Christina was meant to be in her house. When his train came, Jaeger contacted her from the train station. She gave him a warm hug and a grin as she welcomed him. When she saw her spouse was acting strangely, she kindly inquired as to what was happening. Jaeger fixed his gaze unblinkingly on his wife. He was unexpectedly confronted with an unloved lady from a weird, unpleasant woman who he had been dreaming about. He even had the impression that his wife smelled foreign and odd. Grigory Ilyich was seen. As Igor started, he saw Christina stumble and grip the door jamb. I was told something fascinating here. Christina's lips were trembling as she regarded him with fear. She became even pallid as Jaeger spoke. Christina sobbed irately to the ground, her hands covering her face. She did not contest the truth. She didn't hide anything. She just gave Jaeger the truth. He listened to her while he sat on a seat in the hallway. He abruptly said, "I'm going to sell the apartment." Christina cried even more when she said, "I can't live here after this. It's disgusting." She begged her husband to forgive her, but he simply shook his head and said, "Sorry." Jaeger wasn't dishonest. The very following day, he listed the flat for sale, and because he purposefully priced it low, purchasers came forward swiftly. He moved and divorced throughout his whole trip. On the other side, Christina went back to her mother. She couldn't even afford to rent an apartment on her wages as a social worker in a small town. In amazement, her mother sobbed for days. One of the three guys she had been hanging out with, Boris, admitted to her that they had battled about whether any of them could make a married lady feel sexually attracted to them. Christina was totally appalled by the news and humiliation she had received. She had foolishly believed that she liked the three of them simply. Christina sobbed and pondered about the whole thing for a while. She had lost touch with that business. She also lacked the time to look for a replacement. She made an effort to secure a part-time position so she could leave her mother's home. But she had plenty of time to reflect on how her own treachery had harmed her own life before she went to sleep. It was initially just a game that wasn't meant to have any lasting effects. She was only trying to cheat to see what would happen. But soon she found herself being sucked into a vortex of desire from which she was unable to escape. Today, I'll share with you the tale of a woman who, after initially preparing for a small change, ended herself on the verge of infidelity. For 5 years, Nikita and Dasha had been dating. After being married, they moved into Nikita's parents' old flat, which they later decided to leave to their kid after renting it out for a period. Nikita worked at a car dealership, while Dasha was a dental office administrator. They seldom argued and had a very equal relationship. At this point, Dasha started to exhibit an unexpected aspect to his personality. She used to reassure her husband that she truly enjoyed her job and that she could make money rather than just sit around the house doing nothing. But suddenly, she started to bring up his exhaustion from dealing with people more and more frequently. She occasionally brought up her pals, who their husbands had given the go-ahead for not working because they could support the entire family. Naturally, Nikita understood what she was trying to say. But as of now, he could not see how they could possibly make enough money to support both of them. He was eagerly anticipating an increase in income at work. He had recently met his manager and requested a raise. They promised to give him an answer when they had given it some thought. Nikita was regrettably unimpressed on the day they planned for another chat with his boss. The employer was informed that it could not reconsider his remuneration at this time. The man arrived home that evening in a bad temper. He still had to share this chat with his wife. She seems more concerned about her husband's choice. Dasha's agitation was as anticipated. She even became irritated at first. She had genuinely depended on her husband's promotion because it moved her closer to a higher level of living, if not a total release from her employment. She blamed her husband for not being persistent for a long period that day, and she remained silent the remainder of the evening. About a week has gone. The wife informed Nikita one day that she had chosen to take on additional shifts this month after letting some of her anger and complaints go. The couple was set to go on a vacation. For a very long time, she had wanted to get herself a new phone. The moment was right to increase income. The husband merely noted his wife's statements rather than engaging in an argument. "And you can clearly see from them that you haven't given me any gifts." The man even started considering how much cash he would need to save up for a new phone as a present and when he would need to do it. The suggestion was understood. "I had added extra shifts at my clinic a month earlier, but the shift worker still hadn't returned from vacation. My husband occasionally wanted to inquire about her colleague, but he usually arrived in the evening, exhausted, and the thought entirely escaped his head." Nikita got up early one weekend. Dasha had departed for the shift and was no longer at home. He made a leisurely trip to the kitchen to prepare himself a cup of coffee, but was interrupted by an unexpected phone call. Alexander, a good friend of his, called. "Hello, are you up yet? Come on over," he said with concern in his voice. "Something serious, most likely." At this time, Nikita couldn't recall Sasha taking him any place. As Nikita hadn't even had time to eat at home before they met, he had just ordered himself breakfast as they entered the cafe. "Remember our Grishka then?" His companion was introduced. "He recently went to place a veneer, and as you are aware, this pleasure is not inexpensive. Can the man, however, afford it? He owns a number of hotels." Nikita responded. "Why did you call me to?" "To discuss having new teeth." He chuckled. "How do I to inform you? He visited the clinic where your Dasha works, and that's the problem." She reportedly retained his number after the meeting and began messaging him from her own number. "He made the decision to boast to me about how a clinic beauty was making advances toward him. I was immediately aware when I learned the dentist's name." At the same time, Nikita's appetite disappeared. He gently inquired as to the precise subject of his wife's letters to their common buddy. He informed him that she had been begging to meet him and openly flirting with him. They had even briefly crossed paths once, but it was simply for conversation and nothing more. But it was obvious that she had big aspirations. Grisha's phone number was requested by Nikita, who then called him that day. He spoke about the circumstance and inquired further about their encounter. She had, in fact, seen him on the day she was meant to have an additional shift. In other words, it's possible that her boyfriend didn't take a vacation. Dasha merely created an excuse for herself so she could meet other men without risk. In exchange for one of her additional shifts, the husband asked his acquaintance to set him up with Dasha. Moreover, just to be clear, this is a true love date, potentially with a continuation rather than merely a get-together to speak. And he will plan the continuation on his own. When Grigory realized he had been flirting with his old friend's wife, he was initially ashamed and did not even want to take part in the whole thing. But after some consideration, he came to the conclusion that his friend required assistance in order to surround everything. Grigory and Dasha met on the scheduled day at a restaurant. Additionally, Nikita was nearby on the street. While they were having a pleasant talk, the false lover signaled to his buddy that it was time for his wife, quite simply, started to flirt with him by holding his hand and making suggestions about prolonging the evening. Nikita entered the establishment and moved swiftly toward their table. Not even enough time for Dasha to take her fingers away. "What's up, wife? Have you got a roving shift today?" her spouse mockingly inquired. Dasha grew pale as she made a dumbfounded face at her husband, averted her gaze, and made an effort not to meet his eyes. After detailing every interaction they had, Grigory concluded by saying, "And you have seen the rest for yourself." When the husband tried to lift his wife off the table by grabbing her arm, she retreated in terror. "I won't touch you, so let's leave. Get your belongings out of the flat and leave right now," her spouse said. Dasha gave no resistance since she knew her marriage was ended. Beginning the next week, Nikita reported to her place of employment to inform the director that their administrator had established a dating group for herself there. When Dasha's shift attendant learned that Dasha's husband had arrived, she informed him that Dasha had done this before. She promptly saved his number when she saw a customer enter with cash, then made an effort to strike up a conversation with him. It appears that she was seeking for a better and wealthier choice. 2 witness testimonies were sufficient. Dasha lost her job at the clinic. She was able to rent a tiny apartment, but because she was out of work, she was unable to renew the lease. She then temporarily moved in with friends while seeking for a new career. She still had a solid list of possible suitors, of course. None of them, however, rushed to respond to the obnoxious woman. Nikita soon started living alone and filed for divorce. And because of the circumstances surrounding his ex-wife, he came to his own views. He then purposefully assessed the mercantilism of his prospective picks for mistresses. Thankfully, his buddy Grisha was now willing to assist him as well. Such a life narrative is given here. What do you think of this circumstance and the character's actions? Let us know in the comments. I appreciate you taking the time to read the entire story. Remember to sign up for the story channel for you. Moreover, be sure you like this video, and by doing that, you will greatly aid in channel promotion.